Nuclear weapons are not just bigger bombs, they are the most powerful and terrifying inventions humanity has ever created. Their existence has shaped the course of history, altered the way nations interact, and forced the world to confront the possibility of its own destruction. Unlike any other weapon, nuclear arms represent a fundamentally different category of power, one that can end civilization in minutes, not years or decades. They unleash a force so immense that it can level entire cities in a single blinding flash, hotter than the surface of the sun and brighter than anything the human eye was meant to see. The devastation doesn't end with the blast. Everything for miles is flattened, and a silent, invisible fallout drifts on the wind, poisoning the land, water, and air for generations to come. Survivors face radiation sickness, genetic mutations, and a legacy of suffering that can last centuries. Since the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, nuclear weapons have cast a long, chilling shadow over global politics. The knowledge that total annihilation could be just a few decisions away has haunted leaders and citizens alike, shaping everything from military strategy to popular culture. The Cold War era introduced the concept of deterrence, mutual assured destruction. This uneasy balance of terror kept a tense peace, as superpowers stockpiled thousands of warheads, each capable of ending life as we know it. The nuclear arms race became a defining feature of the 20th century, creating a club of nations with the power to destroy the world. To possess a nuclear weapon is to hold the ultimate insurance policy, a guarantee that no adversary can attack without risking their own destruction. It's a seat at the most exclusive and dangerous table in international relations, where decisions are measured in megatons and minutes. The original nuclear club, the United States, Russia, the United Kingdom, France, and China, set the rules of the game, hoping to contain the spread of these weapons. But the system was never airtight, and the allure of nuclear power proved too tempting for others to resist. India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea developed nuclear arsenals outside the treaty framework, each for their own reasons: security, prestige, or survival. Their entry raised the risk of nuclear use by accident, miscalculation, or even intent, making the world a far more unpredictable place. Today, the old arms control agreements that once kept these dangers in check are fraying. New rivalries are heating up, and technological advances are blurring the line between deterrence and actual use. The threat of nuclear conflict, once thought to be receding, is now returning to the forefront of global concerns. Against this backdrop, Iran's nuclear ambitions have become a central drama in world affairs. Tehran's pursuit of nuclear technology has placed it at the heart of a crisis that could reshape not just the Middle East, but the entire global order. Understanding Iran's journey, its motivations, its challenges, and its choices is key to understanding the nuclear challenges of the 21st century, and to imagining a future where the shadow of the bomb no longer defines our world. Iran insists its nuclear program is peaceful, focused on energy and medicine, protected by its rights under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But the world sees secrecy, undeclared sites, and dual-use technology, fuel for both reactors and bombs. Hidden facilities like Natanz and Fordow, and Iran's hostile rhetoric toward Israel, have fueled deep distrust. For Israel and its neighbors, a nuclear Iran is an existential threat, not just a strategic one, and could trigger a regional arms race. This clash of narratives, sovereign rights versus global security, has defined the crisis for over 2 decades, leading to sanctions, sabotage, and a drumbeat of war that, in 2025, has reached a terrifying crescendo. Iran's nuclear story began in the 1950s, at a time when the world was gripped by the promise and peril of atomic energy. With the Cold War intensifying, the United States saw Iran as a crucial ally in the Middle East and sought to strengthen ties through science and technology. Under the Atoms for Peace initiative, the U.S. encouraged peaceful nuclear development, hoping to foster stability and influence in the region. The Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was eager to modernize his country and embraced Western partnerships. He envisioned Iran as a regional powerhouse, and nuclear technology was seen as a symbol of progress and prestige. The United States provided Iran's first research reactor, along with highly enriched uranium, and trained Iranian scientists. This marked the beginning of Iran's nuclear expertise, with Western nations actively supporting the program's growth. Western companies, including German and French firms, joined the effort, helping to construct the Bushehr nuclear power plant. The project was ambitious, aiming to supply Iran with civilian nuclear energy and technological know-how. In 1970, Iran signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, pledging not to pursue nuclear weapons and agreeing to international oversight. At the time, Iran's intentions were widely seen as peaceful, and the country was praised for its commitment to global norms. But the 1979 Islamic Revolution upended everything. The overthrow of the Shah and the rise of a new anti-Western government led to a dramatic collapse in relations with the United States and Europe. Nuclear cooperation halted, and the program was largely frozen as the new regime consolidated power. The brutal Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, marked by Saddam Hussein's use of chemical weapons, left deep scars. The devastation and sense of vulnerability convinced Iran's leaders that they needed a powerful deterrent to protect the nation from future threats. After the war, Iran quietly revived its nuclear ambitions. With Western support gone, Iran turned to new partners, seeking technology and expertise from Pakistan's AQ-Khan network, as well as from China and Russia. These relationships allowed Iran to advance its program away from international scrutiny. The nuclear program became increasingly clandestine, with secret facilities hidden from international inspectors. Iran's activities raised suspicions and set off alarms in capitals around the world. By the late 1980s and throughout the 1990s, Iran was building underground sites and developing technical expertise in secret. These efforts laid the groundwork for the nuclear standoff that would later dominate headlines. The seeds of today's crisis were sown in this era of secrecy, suspicion, and shifting alliances. As the world's attention turned to the Middle East, Iran's nuclear ambitions became a central issue in global diplomacy. What began as a Western-backed project for peaceful energy had, over decades, transformed into a source of global suspicion and tension, casting a long shadow over the region and the world. In the 2000s, Iran's nuclear program burst into the open when secret sites at Natanz and Iraq were revealed. The IAEA found evidence of undeclared enrichment and a pattern of evasion, shattering trust and leading to Iran's referral to the UN Security Council. Sanctions followed, targeting Iran's economy, oil, and banks, aimed at forcing Tehran to halt enrichment. Iran's government framed the standoff as resistance, refusing to buckle under pressure. As sanctions tightened, Iran accelerated its program, installing thousands of centrifuges and enriching uranium to higher levels. The standoff played out in the shadows. Cyber attacks like Stuxnet crippled centrifuges, and nuclear scientists were assassinated. By decade's end, Iran was closer than ever to a nuclear capability, and the world was on the brink of military conflict. The era of quiet suspicion had become one of open confrontation. The stakes had never been higher. The world watched, waiting for the next move. Years of tension led to a breakthrough in 2015. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. Iran agreed to strict limits on enrichment, dismantled centrifuges, and allowed unprecedented inspections in exchange for sanctions relief. For a few years, the deal worked. Iran complied, and the threat of war receded. But critics argued the deal was too lenient, with sunset clauses and no limits on missiles or regional proxies. In 2018, President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the deal, reimposed sanctions, and launched a maximum pressure campaign. The international consensus shattered. Europe, Russia, and China tried to keep the deal alive, but Iran's economic benefits evaporated. Iran responded by breaching its commitments, restarting advanced centrifuges and increasing enrichment. The fragile accord collapsed, and the nuclear crisis returned. Diplomacy had given way to confrontation once again. The world was back on edge. The nuclear question was more urgent than ever. By June 2025, Iran had dismantled all limits on its nuclear program. The breakout time to a bomb shrank to weeks, maybe days, as Iran amassed uranium enriched to 60%, just a step from weapons grade. Tehran's rhetoric grew defiant, hinting it might build a bomb if threatened. Iran barred IAEA inspectors and removed monitoring cameras, fueling global suspicion. On June 12, 2025, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, striking key nuclear sites to prevent Iran from acquiring the bomb. The attack killed top Iranian scientists and military leaders, and Iran retaliated with missile barrages. The world held its breath as the region teetered on the edge of war. Iran suspended nuclear talks, vowing revenge. The IAEA confirmed the strikes but found no radiation leaks. The future of Iran's nuclear program and regional stability was more uncertain than ever. For Israel, a nuclear Iran is not just a strategic challenge. It's an existential threat that shapes every aspect of its national security doctrine. Years of diplomatic efforts and international sanctions have failed to halt Iran's nuclear ambitions, leaving Israeli leaders increasingly convinced that time is running out. As a result, Israel now views preemptive military strikes as the only remaining option to prevent Iran from crossing the nuclear threshold, even at the risk of igniting a wider conflict in the region. The U.S. position has shifted dramatically over the past decade. Under President Obama, the U.S. championed the JCPOA, a landmark nuclear deal designed to curb Iran's program through diplomacy and verification. But President Trump withdrew from the agreement, instead imposing a campaign of maximum pressure through harsh economic sanctions, aiming to force Iran back to the negotiating table. Now, in 2025, the U.S. finds itself in a complex position, publicly supporting Israel's right to self-defense while also urging restraint and calling for renewed diplomatic engagement to avoid a catastrophic war. The European Union and the United Kingdom remain steadfast in their belief that diplomacy is the only sustainable solution. They have consistently condemned both Iran's nuclear escalation and the U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA, which they see as a trigger for the current crisis. European leaders now call for urgent de-escalation, warning that further military action could destabilize not just the Middle East, but global security as well. They are working behind the scenes to revive talks, hoping to bring both Washington and Tehran back to the negotiating table. Meanwhile, Russia and China have taken a very different stance. They blame the United States for the current crisis, arguing that the collapse of the nuclear deal was a direct result of American policy. Both Moscow and Beijing oppose further sanctions, and have instead deepened their economic and military ties with Iran, seeing it as a valuable counterweight to U.S. influence in the region. The recent Israeli strikes have only deepened global divisions, polarizing the international community and making consensus even harder to achieve. Each major power is now pursuing its own interests, often at the expense of collective security. The United Nations Security Council, paralyzed by deep divisions among its permanent members, has been unable to take decisive action. The entire region stands on a knife's edge, with the risk of escalation looming over every diplomatic move and military maneuver. With no consensus on the way forward, the world faces a dangerous impasse. Every nation interprets the crisis through its own lens of security, rivalry, and historical grievances, making cooperation elusive. The stakes are not just regional, they are truly global, with the potential to reshape alliances, energy markets, and the very norms of nuclear non-proliferation. The world's response to this crisis will ultimately shape the future of the international nuclear order, and determine whether diplomacy or confrontation defines the next chapter. The Israeli strikes have pushed the Middle East to its most dangerous moment in decades. Iran vows revenge, threatening U.S. bases and promising to unleash its network of proxies if attacked further. The risk of a wider war is real. Any Iranian attack on U.S. forces could trigger massive retaliation and regional chaos. The crisis has also fueled nuclear ambitions in Saudi Arabia and Turkey, threatening a regional arms race. If Iran builds a bomb despite the strikes, its rivals may follow suit, shattering the non-proliferation treaty. The message, only nuclear weapons guarantees security. A wider war would devastate the global economy, especially if Iran tries to close the Strait of Hormuz. The cost in lives and economic ruin would be felt worldwide. The world now faces the immediate reality of escalation, proliferation, and war. As of mid-June 2025, the world stands at a crossroads. Three futures are possible: a return to diplomacy, a period of intensified pressure and covert conflict, or a catastrophic regional war. Diplomacy remains the only path to a peaceful resolution, but mistrust runs deep. More likely is a dangerous stalemate: sanctions, cyber attacks, and proxy clashes, with Iran's program advancing in the shadows. The worst-case scenario: all-out war, drawing in the US, Israel, Iran, and their allies with devastating consequences. Has the Israeli strikes set back Iran's program or only hardened its resolve? Can diplomacy survive in an environment of open hostility? The answers will define global security for generations. The world must decide: is a nuclear-free future a naive dream or the only sane path forward?